I want you to get together.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Biblical Hitman. I'm your host, Steven, and I'm here with Jesse and Taylor. Taylor has made it into the studio for part two. He missed out on part one, but really excited about this one here. Joining us today is Paul Stobbs. Paul is the author of the title of the book, The Nephilim Looked Like Clowns. This is a part two of a little take on his book, and Paul's been taking us on a journey, and this is awesome stuff. I can't wait to get into this episode specifically. Real quick, just to recap a little bit on part one. Part one was just like the foundation work that he actually goes over in his book. We talk about the Nephilim, we talk about the fallen angels, we talk about, pre-flood, post-flood, things that took place in the garden, and just a lot of different concepts. And also in that episode, Paul also shared his testimony. So if you haven't done so, go ahead, check that out, and you won't be disappointed. With all that said, folks, if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button, like the show, share it with your friends. It definitely helps this channel grow, and we just really appreciate everyone that has done that and supported us, and it's gonna get us to where we want to be. So. Real quick, Paul, thank you for joining us again, man. If you just don't mind sharing with the audience where they can find you and just a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. No, thanks for having me back, Stephen. It's good to be here. Yeah, so I am a YouTuber. You can find me on YouTube primarily, but I am on other platforms like Odyssey and Rumble, but I've fallen severely behind with backlogging all my work on there. So YouTube's the place to find me. And I do also have a podcast as well, which you can find on anywhere you do a podcast, called The Truth of Therapy Sessions, but that's also a live show every Sunday on YouTube at the same time. So that's where you'll find me. And yeah, I'm the author of the book The Nephilim Look Like Clowns, and the creator of the Theory and series with over 44 episodes online to watch for free. And I've been doing the podcast circuit now for like a year to 6 months, explaining this wild, insane theory, which I know what it sounds like on the surface, believe me, but there's a lot more here than you would assume from the title. And yeah, it's good to be here just to flesh it out a bit more. Like I said in the first half, we kind of laid out the foundation for the theory. This is a biblical theory. I covered this completely from a biblical angle, a Christian contrarian angle more than anything. And you're not going to hear what I talk about in Sunday schools, that's for sure, but I think it all is completely biblically grounded. And I do think the Nephilim would have had clown-like features inherited from the seraphim fallen angel parents, mixing with the daughters of Cain. So let's get back into it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely, man. So, all right, man. Well, we're strapped in. We're ready to go. I think a good place to start would be where we kind of left off. And that was where you started to kind of touch on, but we did not jump into it. We wanted to do a part two segment here. Mm-hmm. And this is where you were going to break to us the history behind all of this. And ready, go.
Sure. So like I said, the main history was covered in part one, which is about the biblical history of where do we even get Nephilim from. So that's covered. So today we're going to talk about the history of the modern costume of a clown itself, and how this would start to feed into the biblical narrative, and how we can make those connections, and how I made those connections. So the costume of a clown is actually a very modern creation. It was only created about 200 years ago in 1799. Officially, the clown that we know of today, that is the common white skin, red nose, silly red wig, multicolored pattern clothing type clown, that type of clown was only created in 1799. But there's always been funny men throughout history, going back to the Egyptian times, you know what I mean? The pharaohs are quite common to have very small people doing silly things, kind of like a jester in a sense, to model the god Bes, which is like a good look god in some ways, and a god of comedy and security in a way. But those are kind of irrelevant to the theory, but a lot of people do like to kind of refer to them quite a lot when talking about where clowns come from. But a clown is a very specific creation, like I said, only made 200 years ago. So I can give you a brief rundown of how we got to the clown costume. And really it starts in more or so ancient Greece, Greek theatre, the Attic theatre, and Roman theatre into about 500 AD. Let's go off the official timeline that we've been given. So if you go off that timeline, Rome began to kind of collapse in on itself with a takeover of Christendom and the Byzantine Empire, and actors like the Sanios or the Mimics or the Stupidus, these Roman street performers, should we call them, were kind of seen as prostitutes. It was kind of dirty to be an actor in those times because you're pretending to be something you're not. You know what I mean? So it was kind of frowned. Acting was seen like a filthy profession for the lowly people who were sinners, and it just kind of fell out of fashion and security for actors in that time with that moral decline and then takeover of Christendom. So you find there was actually a lot of out-of-work actors in that period of time who had to kind of migrate out of Italy and start traveling all throughout Europe. And this is where we get our first circus, in a sense, called the Commedia dell'arte movement. And the Commedia dell'arte movement quite literally ran from about 500 to 1500 into the 17th century. And it's kind of still alive today, but not as it used to be. So this is 1,000 years in the making, this history. And this traveling troupe was traveling through Europe looking for work, basically, because they couldn't really find much work in Italy anymore. However, you do find jesters started to appear in this early medieval period because some of these out-of-work actors were being hired by kings and queens and rich people, kind of the only people who could get away with having a clown or having a house actor, you know, and who's gonna tell the king he can't have one, you know, it's that kind of thing. So that's where the tradition of jesters really comes from. Comedians and actors being hired as personal jesters for the rich and affluential, and it kind of became a status symbol to have a jester if you could afford one. You know, it became quite popular to get yourself a jester of some kind if you were a king, shall we say. But then the jester itself is simply just a mimic of the king. So the early jester costumes are a man dressing like a over-exaggerated version of a king. So the floppy hat was a crown, he had the scepter with a silly bladder on the end of it to bop people with, you know, and it was a mockery of the king, and there's many things that people have quite traditionally heard of, things like reminding the king of his own humanity, that type of thing. The jester's there to keep the king grounded, you know, and often they became advisors, confidants, and good friends. And there's many, many funny stories throughout history, which I mentioned in the book briefly, of just the way jesters had this odd relationship with the most powerful people in their countries, you know, and it's kind of the jester could get away with such things. But that, you can box jesters off for now, because they're not really anything to do with where we get a clown from. That's basically all a jester truly is, though it did morph into the modern later Renaissance period into something odd with the Venetian carnival and the Venetian masks kind of coming back into popularity. But we'll get back to those once I give you this history. So I'm going to take a quick breath, have a drink of water, because this is a long ride, okay? And I'm going to have many avenues here, but it will make a lot of sense when I get back to the coming out of the medieval period. And with this context, you will see that clowns truly are, and always have been, representations of demons. So give me a second.
Yeah, it's just so this is awesome because there's really something to it, especially I think when you broke down earlier in the book, right? Because we're kind of like in the second half, right?
Yeah.
Where you kind of give this description of pasty white skinned Nephilim beings, and it just kind of that made me did kind of get me into like, okay, well, if they were cannibalistic in nature, then I could see why there's red on the nose, there's red around the mouth with the pasty white skin and the red hair. It just kind of all flowed a little bit for me. So I totally understand.
Oh yeah, well at the back end of this podcast we'll get into the features of a clown and how they relate directly to Nephilim features, of course. So let's get the history out of the way, because you can't, like I said, with this grounding you can understand that I'm not basically just talking out my ass. This is backed up by actual documented history, what I'm talking about here. It's not really hidden, it's just not known or talked about, but it's obvious when you actually look into it. So, coming out of the medieval period, travelling troops, the Commedia dell'arte, straight out of Italy. They're travelling around and they've got themselves some stock characters, you call them. So a stock character basically represents something anybody anywhere could recognise on the stage. So a soldier, a policeman, a rich person, a servant, the daughter of a rich man, or just a drunk. Something that anybody anywhere will know what that character represents, and you can relate. Because these people go around putting on improvised stage shows in town squares. They'd roll in, set up a quick stage, do some performances, have a laugh with these stock characters. Everyone would laugh, you know, and throw some money in a hat, and then they'd move on to the next village to do the same again, and that's how they made their living. That's what they did for their entire life. It was in the family, it was traditional, they trained new people who joined, and it went on for 1,000 years. Through that 1,000 years, there was a development in characters, and we kind of they mastered routines that were popular, with specific characters, and these were like called zany characters. And in a way, they were all comedians. They were all jesters of a sort. They were all clowns of a sort, but they weren't a clown like we would call today. They would call them zanies. So they're there for comedic purposes and to be the foil for the good guy and things like this. Now, they kind of introduced at the back end of the medieval period a brand new character. So we're talking about the 1500s here. And this is odd because it's been 1,000 years already, and suddenly you have this insert of this brand new character towards the end of this season. And this new character is called Harlequin. So you've all heard this name before. Everyone's heard of Harlequin, and this is kind of the real first proto-clown as we kind of know it today. Now, when you say Harlequin, people think of a tight diamond leotard wearing guy with maybe like a sailor's hat to the side or something, or a Venetian mask covering his eyes, and he's like a stick or something like this. And traditionally, yes, that is the most modern iterations of Harlequin. That's what he's known as today. But originally, he looked nothing like this. When he was first introduced, he had loose, baggy white rags on, and he had coloured patches kind of just randomly put all over the place, multicolours, with tufts of hair kind of sewn into them. And he had this really dark, upturned nose, angry-eyed looking mask with a horn sticking out the top. And there's a specific reason why he looked like this, because he represented a very unique character, which this travelling troupe had learnt about, going from village to village, all through Europe. And I'm talking from the very end of Portugal all the way to the tips of Russia. They've been everywhere and everywhere on that continent. They knew most cultures. They'd heard plenty of stories, and they travelled their entire lives, generation after generation after generation. And they continuously bumped into a reoccurring character that everywhere they went, they all knew about this odd mythological being called the Wildman. So, being a troupe that works with stock characters that everybody could recognise, they incorporated the Wildman into the troupe under the guise of, or the name of, Harlequin. Now, Harlequin's name is unique in the sense that it's based on Northern Teutonic mythology of wild men, specifically French late medieval period monk writings about the wild hunt, and Harlequin, his name was. Now, Harlequin is kind of like a tall, brutish beast with a giant club who had a band of little demons that followed him everywhere he went. And he would just go from village to village, terrorizing the place, And there's like eyewitness accounts from this ancient 10th century monk who documented going through his village. And that's kind of where you get the first name. So Harlequins is a French version. In Ireland, they call them Harlequin. There's kind of the hairy Cain is like a reference to a biblical reference there of Cain being this wild beast man of some kind. Perhaps a reference to, where the heritage of these beasts come from, the lineage of Cain and his daughters. So it's all kind of interlinked in the name. But that's the northern kind of influence. But then there's also this kind of Greek, Roman, Mediterranean influence that was merged together to make it look the way he did, with this like Mercury-esque vibe. So Harlequin was based after this brutish, giant, club-wielding, hairy beast. But he was also kind of quick-footed. He could fly on the stage and do backflips and somersaults. He was quick-witted, and he had a magical air about him. And this is because he's modelled also after Dionysus and of the Thracian culture down south, which is Romania today, that kind of region, the Baltic Sea region, and also the Italian traditions of Arlecchino, which is kind of like a drunk, along with Mercury as well, who has the feathers on his feet and his caduceus staff. Dionysus has his thyrsus staff with a pine cone on top, and the brutish wild man had a giant club. So Harlequin, which is Arlecchino, or Harlequins, kind of in this blended together called Harlequin, is a club-wielding, multicoloured, patched, skinned, hairy, tuft monster who was really fleet of foot and fast and quick-witted. It's like a mashup of all these themes from different regions of Europe representing this godlike hairy beast man. Now, the wild man, we have many traditions of the wild man all over the earth. It's not just European in nature. And I go into my book and I do lay out where you'll find the hairy wild beast man on every single continent, in every mountain, in every condition and climate. The most popular being, the northern the northern regions of America and Sasquatch. That's probably the most popular one you guys will recognize immediately. But they are quite literally in every single country with their own unique name and backstory, and they all look the same practically. So, where do you get the Wildman from? Well, I think the Wildman is kind of the cold climate version of a Nephilim creature in some way. They're just hairier than their southern, warmer regioned brethren who are very skin orientated. You know what I mean? They're going to the Rakshasa demons of India, let's say, who are completely naked most of the time because it's very hot. The further north you go, the hairier they seem to get, is what I've kind of noticed. But we're talking about demons here. Giants, so Nephilim, demonic, cannibalistic monsters that could control many little demons. Now, not only was Harlequin's kind of like this mysterious figure that could control lesser demons. If we go back to the book of Jasher, it's talking about the last end times just before Noah's flood, so that particular ending reset version. It's saying that humans started mixing themselves with animals. There was like a mixing of kinds thing going on. Just after the giants were kind of wiped out as a punishment for the Watchers who made them, humans took it on their own accord to manipulate their own DNA, not mix themselves with angels, but corrupt themselves with some kind of genetic experimentation. I think these little demons following around the giants you have the OG Nephilim, who are the descendants of angels, and then you have the lesser humans who have mixed themselves with animals. And the only reason you can tell this is probably the case is because the Dionysus myth is quite literally, he is the patron god of theatre and wine and debauchery, and he's Bacchus in the Roman tradition. It's the same god. And he would go from village to village with a wild horde party, and he would just roll in, wreck the place, and then people would join his band and go to the next place, and they would have this wild orgiastic party and get absolutely wasted. But the people who followed him turned into fauns, maenads, and satyrs. So this is an idea of people change themselves when in the presence of these monsters, these Nephilim giants, to become hybridized human-animal hybrids. It's kind of there in the Dionysian mythos. It's there in the Book of Jasher. It's kind of all coming together into this. You can see it manifesting in these ancient European traditions of the wild man specifically. So this is where Harlequin comes from. Harlequin is a representation of the Nephilim, but the European flavour. So that's the first historical basis for where we get the first proto-style of clown into Western theatre. Harlequin, modelled after European demons. So any questions? Anything you want to, before I go to the next stage?
I think it's funny, the Harley Quinn stuff. Is like, I say Harley Quinn because I'm thinking of Batman. And that's obviously where they got that from, is Batman, because she dresses like a clown.
Absolutely.
But it's funny because they chose this like dainty, pretty girl that's just out of her mind to play that role.
Well, that's the character of Harlequin originally. He was out of his mind. He was wild and crazy and funny, and he had his club. It's called the Slapstick. That's where you get that phrase from. And he would whip the stage, and he had magical powers. So the whole stage would just suddenly change. Like, all the people would quickly move the backdrop out of the way and swap it out with something else, But it's kind of like he was that energetic, demonic energy in the show. He added that wild element that people just love. They went crazy for it. 'Cause it's like, this is crazy, this is nuts, this is hilarious, And he would go around sticking his stick up people's backsides, and he was really rude and crude. He was like treating like a phallus all the time, And it was just funny. It was just is what it was. He was a wild maniac on stage who was doing backflips all over the place and just jumping in and out of windows and through trapdoors. And it was just it was nuts, And people did like that. But as time went on, his character did develop over the next 300 years. So we're coming out of the 1500s to the 1800s here. And you'll find he kind of developed and got a bit more boring as time went on. His routines got a bit less improvised and a bit more stale and predictable. And they stuck with the same routines wherever they went. And people knew, when Harlequin came on by the mid-1700s, they knew what to expect from the guy. They knew what his routine would be. People were bored. But not only that, he kind of changed as well as a character. The routine kind of became this. He would pine after the daughter of the rich man, Columbine. And he would he would kind of grab her and run away with her. And these two lovers just running off into the distance, Harlequin and Columbine. Columbine kind of dressed similar to Harlequin. She had the checkered dress, but hers was a big dress made of the same multicolored patterns. So kind of a match made in heaven. They were meant for each other. But the rich man was annoyed because Harlequin's his servant. So his servant's just stolen his daughter and ran off. But he has another servant called Pedrolino. And Pedrolino, this is where we get clown from. Okay? So there's a bit of a bait and switch that goes on soon. So Pedrolino, the Italian name, for the French call him Poirot. It's quite famous for another clown everyone knows of. And Pedrolino's kind of like, from the Italian tradition, he's just stupid. He's dumb. He's slow to the uptake. He doesn't really know what's going on, you know. And him and Harlequin have this back and forth. Harlequin's really quick and witty, but the other servant is really dumb and slow and dopey, you know. And that's kind of where the comedy back and forth arises usually. And it's kind of like a Looney Tunes chase scene. The rich man and Pedrolino chase after Harlequin and Columbine, and that's the comedy for an hour and a half. They're running from scene to scene, doing wacky Looney Tunes antics to each other.
So it's like the Tom and Jerry of clowns, basically.
In a way, yeah. They were like hitting each other head with pans or giant mallets, and they were through like special stage effects. They would like flatten themselves or break their arm or something, or fall through a door, and then they go to the next scene and they're completely healed and they're doing something else, you know. And that's kind of the hour and a half show. This chase scene to get Columbine back from Harlequin, and obviously Harlequin would always outwit Pedrolino because Pedrolino's stupid, and that's kind of the joke, you know. But as time went on, Pedrolino kind of got a bit sharper because this show traveled through different places. And the Italians had their version, which was the dumb servant. And then you had the French version, which kind of came around the 1800s, Poirot. But he was like sad. He was just like crying all the time and he was depressed. And his shtick was like, why does Columbine love Harlequin so much? I love her. Why doesn't she love me? It's very French, you know, very miserable French like type of stuff. And it's kind of, that's the theatre of the French version, you know, this sad sack clown who has unrequited love, you know. That's kind of his thing. And he kind of stole the show in France because I think the French could relate more to Poirot than they could to Harlequin or something, I don't know. But Harlequin's costume, as these iterations go on, is getting tighter, less brutish. His mask is getting thinner and sleeker. His hat's getting more like of like a military standard and prim and proper. His movements are getting more fancy, you know, and upright and posh. And he's losing that demonic edge with each kind of like generation. He's not as witty and brutish and crude and rude as he used to be. He's fancy and smart and intelligent and upright and eloquent with his words, you know, and he became a fancy lad about town rather than a demonic influence in the show. So he got boring, basically. And like I said, he became a doting, lovesick fool chasing after the daughter of the rich man. So people were kind of just sick of it. But Pedrolino, people thought he was funny. He's like, this guy gets it. You know, he's finally some comedy with his stupid antics, you know. But Britain took it a next step further when the British theatre took hold of this and took the tradition and ran it with their own. Their version of Pedrolino, which we called clown, this is where we get the word clown from in Britain. It was not like these other Southern European versions of Pedrolino. It was just like Harlequin was originally. Wild, crude, rude, doesn't care about his boss at all, only cares about drinking alcohol and eating sausages, just out for himself. You know, he doesn't give a crap about anybody. And that's kind of, he was that demonic element once again, inserted back into the Commedia dell'arte tradition. And Harlequin was just fading out of popularity and got boring and bland. So the comedy was still the same. It was Pedrolino versus Harlequin chasing after the daughter, but everyone loved the British clown more and was rooting for the clown rather than Harlequin now. Roles had switched. So the demonic character of Harlequin transferred over to the British clown. There was a role reversal. So in spirit alone, the clown of the British Commedia dell'arte version is based off the demonic spirit of Harlequin originally. So there is that. But let's get into the costume of the clown. Up until this point, around about 1789, something like that. British theatre is kind of split. You have the rich and poor versions of theatre. So you had like the Royal Theatre where the rich people went. Then you had Sadler's Wells Theatre in London, which was kind of where the poor people went. And there was an actor who was kind of growing up in that environment called Joseph Grimaldi. He was born into it. His dad was called the Signor Grimaldi. He was funnily enough, he was the dentist of Queen Charlotte when he first came over from Italy, and then he quit that profession to become a dance instructor and a stagehand, and then leaders of the plays in that region. So very odd switch, but very much involved with the upper echelons of society in his time. Like I said, the dentist of Queen Charlotte's quite a profound job to have, I suppose, for the day. But he went into theatre, and his son with him. Now he was a horrible father. He abused young Joseph Grimaldi a lot and kind of forced him into the trade and had him on stage at the age of like 5 and was whipping him around. There's one accident where he threw him into the stage by accident, but the young Grimaldi, look, he was okay, but he could have probably killed himself quite easily in that process. But the point is, he grew up and was always being abused and kind of shouted at and belittled by his father. But he was a great performer. Like, even from a young age, young Grimaldi was hilarious. And I think he was always kind of going against his dad in a cheeky way. I think that's where he got his comedy from, his cheekiness. And all the stagehands loved him, and he was very much a man of the theatre, grew up in the theatre, and he performed 2 shows a night in the poor theatre of Sadler's Wells, and then quickly ran over to the rich one and did another one there. And he did that for his entire life, practically. He never stopped doing this. And, he had to run across London in 10 minutes to get to the next stage just to put on that next performance in time. And he never missed a show, So this guy was serious, and he was hilarious, and he was all in all clown. Like, he was just a embodiment of what you would consider a funny comedic clown today. And he never really got his big break until, and this is where politics gets involved, it gets a bit weird now, he married the daughter of the man who owned the Sadler's Wells Theatre. So this is called Richard Hughes. Richard Hughes, he created the first British circus. Okay, so it wasn't what you think it would be, though. It's the first time the word circus had been used to describe what this was. But the first British circus was by a guy called Philip Astley, and it was horse tricks. You'd have this ring, and you'd get on top of a horse and run around in a circle, and you'd do backflips off the horse and handstands and things like that. And that was the first proto-circus of Britain. Philip Astley was an ex-military man where everything was on horseback, so he knew a thing or two, and when he came back after duty, he opened this this amphitheatre, he called it. But then Richard Hughes kind of saw this and how popular it was and teamed up with a guy called Charles Dibdin, who was a powerful media mogul of the day, playwright, songwriter, and he had a lot of money. He was a Freemason, a member of the Leicester Lodge, and he teamed up with Charles Dibdin, and they opened their own amphitheatre horse trick place, and they called it the Royal Circus. And that's the first time you've heard that word used in Britain to describe anything of the sorts. So Charles Dibdin created the first circus in Britain, so called with that name. Remember that, because that name's going to be important soon. So Charles Dibdin doing his thing with Richard Hughes. Richard Hughes runs this small theatre called Sadler's Wells as well, but he hires people to run it for him. He just owns the place. He's just a rich guy who has a lot of money, and he just puts it into anything creative and artistic. But he hires other people who he kind of knows, and nepotism at work, the sons of his friends and things like this. He hires them to kind of run the shows for him and write the scripts and make it happen and bring the money in. So Richard Hughes, his daughter, Mary Hughes, marries this actor, Joseph Grimaldi, I mentioned earlier, this young Grimaldi. She's pregnant, they're happy, they're in love, they're married. She dies at childbirth. A horrible event. Joseph Grimaldi is devastated. Obviously, he's lost the love of his life and his child in one go. Her last words were to Richard Hughes. And she said, "Look after poor Joe. Please, Richard, look after poor Joe." Odd thing to say to your father. People tried to make out in history that she was talking to her brother, who was also called Richard Hughes, but I think there's a bit of a confusion because when you get that far back in genealogies, it becomes a bit of a mess and everyone's named after each other and it gets really weird. I think she was talking to her father, from what I can deduce from the memoirs. She basically said to her dad, "Look after him. Please, make sure he's okay, because he's not going to be able to handle this. He's a sensitive soul," that type of thing. So, daughter's dead. He has this actor who's his ex-son-in-law, who's a sad sack, miserable person now. He goes into complete lunatic depression. He even damages his foot at one point. He shoots himself in the foot with a prop gun. He gets really out of hand and horrible. So he pulls him out of this rut, basically. He goes to his new showrunner. So Richard Hughes goes to this guy he's just hired. And this guy he's just hired is called Charles Dibdin Jr. So he's hired the son of that guy I mentioned earlier he opened a circus with, okay? He's hired his friend's, his mate's son, you know what I mean? And prior to that, he'd hired his mate's other son, Thomas Dibdin. So it's kind of in the tradition to hire a Dibdin child to do this thing, you know? But this is a Freemasonic family. You got to remember this. Like I said, his father, Dibdin Sr., look him up, very famous man of the time. Like, powerful media, performative music mogul of the industry days. Just like you'd have the Illuminati industry, music industry today. That guy was the pinnacle of it then, you know what I mean? But it was a bit different back then. It was theatre shows. It was something else, you know? He's like, he was well known. His music has been equated by royalty to being the thing that kept the morale of the British Navy up against the Napoleonic Wars, that type of thing, you know what I mean? He's been like... It's thanks to Charles Dibdin and his songs our soldiers made it through while colonizing India. It's that type of stuff. You know, they equate him with a lot of stuff because the sailors would sing his songs while out and about and doing the colonizing thing, you know. And his brother, Tom, who's also called Thomas Dibdin. Again, they repeat names all the time. He called his son Thomas Dibdin. He had a brother called Thomas Dibdin. I had to parse all these names out by going through it all. It's really complicated. But his brother died in India while colonizing India with the East India Company, which isn't a governmental agency. It was a private company who was colonizing East India at the time. So Charles Dibdin traveled back and forth to India all the time to see his brother and to take part in this colonization attempt of India. And he was a Freemason. He was a traveling man, as they called themselves. He was intimately well acquainted with Indian iconography. He was going to move to India in his own memoirs, but he chickened out last minute because of bad weather. His ship couldn't sail, and he decided just to stay in England, and he lived out the rest of his life in England instead. Because traveling then was a big deal. You could die. You know, getting to one country to another wasn't as a breeze as it is today. You will get sick and probably die on the journey. You know, if you're not doing it right, or if you have a bad captain, or you just hit a bad storm at any given moment, or anything at all can happen, you know. So he decided against it. He stayed in England, but he was going to move to India because he was so well acquainted with it. So I believe his influence of Indian religion and iconography definitely was brought back to England and put into his shows and his work. And did a lot of work, oddly enough, on Indian slaves as well, and had characters called Mungo and all. It was really odd, really what you would call racist stuff today. You know what I mean, by any standard, but then I guess it was normal then, you know what I mean? And
you get the woke mob definitely coming after you.
Yeah, but from his perspective, I think he had a reverence for them. He wasn't putting them down. He loved those people. He loved the Indian people, but the way he went about it, it's like today, it's basically blackface. You know what I mean? It's not considered like cool today to do that type of thing. But he did it out of reverence, you know. I don't think he was trying to put the people down or anything. His characters weren't bad people, you know. They were of upright moral standards and this type of stuff. But anyway, so he knew India well. No doubt his son, Charles Dibdin Jr., also knew India really well. And the only reason I can deduce this is because of what happened next. So young Dibdin, the son of this powerful Freemason, has been hired by Richard Hughes to run up the Sadler's Wells Theatre with an up-and-coming actor, Joseph Grimaldi, who has been in the industry for years, but he's never had a major role. So Richard Hughes says to young Dibdin, listen, my daughter made me promise to look after this guy. You give him a leading role. The next script you write, he's the lead. Okay? He needs this. Like, he's on the edge. You know, the guy needs a break. Give it to him. And then I fulfilled my promise to my dying daughter. I've done my bit. He's on his own then. Whatever. Do what he needs to do, you know. So, Charles Dibdin Jr. wrote this script, but he had a problem. There was already a clown, a house clown. The guy who always played the clown, called Charles Dubois, a French actor. And you can tell by the name, a really pretentious guy, really full of himself, like classically trained, you know what I mean? It's kind of, and who's this young Grimaldi who's never been to any classical schools or been formally trained in anything, you know, coming to try and impede on my territory, you know. But Charles Dibdin Jr. had a plan. He was like, okay, we're going to have two clowns, and we're going to let the audience decide who's the best, basically. So he wrote this script to have two clowns. And he dressed them in this new style of dress, and they called them like dresses, basically. And if you look at them, they actually have Asian symbols on them, circle Asian logos with lines, a lot like Shintoism and things like this, those type of logos, and Buddhist pinwheels kind of on the chest, and red and white frills going all the way down. And that's like the first early iteration of this new costume that was introduced at this time. And a young Dibdin wanted to make his mark on the industry, so he completely changed the costume of clown for this new show involving two clowns. It was his way of making his mark, it's said in his memoirs. But people who describe it, who are talking about this, biographers, are saying, like, this costume change was unprecedented for the time. You have to understand, Pedrolino, going all the way back to the beginning of the Commedia dell'arte movement, 1,000 years old, this character, has never changed his costume. He's always been plain white rags. He is a servant of the rich man. He doesn't have fancy clothes. He doesn't have colour. He has floppy, loose rags. And the styles kind of changed. In the Elizabethan age, he was changed to kind of be like, still a servant, so he had a ruffle that was floppy. And that's a joke, because only people who were rich could afford starch to make the ruffle thick and hard. You know what I mean? Because he's a poor servant. So that's where the floppy ruffle comes from in a clown, traditionally. But it was still white. No colour. Never add colour to Pedrolino. That's his stock image, But then suddenly this young son of a Freemason comes along in 1799 and dresses the clown in this insane costume. Like, it looks like something straight out of India and Indian demon iconography, as I quite literally quote one biographer saying in my book. It's like, where is this change come from? Where was the inspiration? Nowhere is it mentioned where the inspiration for this dress comes from. No one mentioned it. Even the guy who made the change never mentions where he got his inspiration from, just that he did it. But, as I've connected, his father was well acquainted with India, and I've looked into it. It turns out it's an identical frill-for-frill copy of the costumes worn by the Rakshasa temple demons of Thailand. It's identical. And that's where he got his inspiration from. He copied what the Nephilim of India look like and dressed the clown.
Yeah.
On purpose?
Oh, definitely, yeah.
For like a ritual or anything, or maybe like it was like to have power over the people, or he made like an agreement with that demon?
We'll get into the purposes of what the costume of a clown is actually for as we go on. Obviously, so we're getting into the realms of my theory and speculation here, but I think it's grounded enough in the occult to understand that this is the method they were using. They wanted to introduce into the modern popular media of the day. Today it's TV and social media. Back then it was theatre. They wanted to introduce demons, basically, and get people to idolize and worship the image of demons, and to make contracts with and have relations with demons in whatever means that is. And to do that, you popularize them in the minds of the masses, and you get more people to dress that way. The more people who dress like a demon, the more people that open themselves up to be possessed by demons, because that's the secret, you see.
Right.
You
And I think
like
that's a big thing too with like Halloween, right?
Oh yeah.
You have the holiday Halloween, you got everyone dressing up as all of these demonic entities and these Nephilim and all this kind of stuff, and it just kind of just builds up this big energy bomb and starts probably increasing the way these spirits kind of work.
Oh yeah, it gives them power. Yeah, I mean, listen,
Right.
it's no secret. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's no secret anywhere else in the world that when you do a spiritual ritual, you dress like the thing you want to channel in the spirit realm. So you wear a costume that mirrors the creature, entity, or spirit you want to get in communication with by allowing it into your body. You create a mirror of it, and when you mirror something in the spirit realm, you create a channel, a connection to it, and then it can readily get through that channel into your vessel because you are dressed in its image. That's the trick. That's a secret of the spiritual world people don't know about.
Modern day actors, it seems now they're doing just the same, just a new era of. Wow.
Well, can you see now why early Christendom thought actors were filthy, dirty, pagan prostitutes who are selling their bodies out to the spirits? That's why it was demonized.
Right.
Yeah,
I find it interesting too that just Aleister Crowley in his books and he really advocates for the fact that the one way to fully powerfully invoke a spirit is by acting.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
when I read that, it just blew me away. I read that probably like a year ago now. I think I shared it to you guys too. And I'm like, wow, okay.
It's a secret. It's a trick of the trade. Yeah, it's an occult secret. You know, in the West, it's an occult secret. Only those in the know really know about it. But everywhere else, it's common knowledge in like most tribes around the world who practice these shamanistic rituals. Like they know what a costume is for, and they take it very serious. It's sacred to them.
Zulu tribe too in Africa did a lot with that too. Like they would dress up and like.
There's a lot of tribes in Africa.
Things. Oh yeah, I know lots of them that do that.
It's rife with it. Absolutely.
Hollywood considers this method acting, right?
Yeah, well, they have their own names to make it just something psychological. You know what I mean? It's
right.
It's Jungian. It's Jungian in nature. You know, it's not spiritual. It's just something we figured out. You know, because we're so clever. But no, it's an ancient practice. It's a very old, well understood practice. So what these Dibdins were doing, who I believe were Freemasons, who work intimately with demons. I think they're the foot soldiers in the physical realm for the demons in the spiritual realm, which are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. I think they found a way to inject into the modern media of their time the image of a demon, popularizing it. And so, getting to the story, Joseph Grimaldi won. Charles Dubois was out. That show was a smash hit for Grimaldi. He was hilarious. And Dubois was old. He was done. He was out. And he got depressed and became an alcoholic after that and didn't really perform much anymore. But Joseph Grimaldi... Yeah, but then Joseph Grimaldi took it upon himself from then. He had this new costume, which was given to him by the son of a Freemason, which is the exact copy of a Rakshasa demon. And then he sat in front of a mirror. This is the story you'll find in the memoirs. And he started playing with the makeup. And he came up with his own signature clown look. And it was white skin, red triangles on the cheeks and above the eyebrows here. And some blue patches here and there. A wild, fuzzy red wig that came out the sides like this. And he kind of like... puffed up some of the sleeves and did his own little minutiae changes to it. But really, he didn't create the costume of a clown. He just kind of played around with the makeup a little bit after the fact. The costume of a clown was introduced by Freemasons. That has to be understood historically speaking.
The Shriners make sense, right?
Well, we'll get into that. Yeah, don't get ahead of yourself. Trust me.
Let him go. Let's go. Yeah. Let him cook.
So, like I said, the costume's changed now, and it's quite fitting that the clown, which replaced Harlequin, who was based after European Nephilim, has now replaced Harlequin in character and in demon form, but he's gone by the Indian flavour of Nephilim instead. So there's been a switch there, and the demon is back in the show, but it's through the clown instead. And Joseph Grimaldi he's basically been called the father of modern clowns, because he did a show after this with his brand new full iteration with the makeup and everything. And people came from all over to watch the show who were in the profession. And they were like, this new costume, I must have my own version. And that's where the tradition of making your own clown costume came from, based off this original form. And it's actually the tradition still goes on today. You can't copy another clown's makeup or costume. It's like taboo. You don't do that. In fact, what you have to do, what it's encouraged to do, if you're a professional clown, you have to trademark and copyright your costume design on an egg. And they have this thing called an egg registry. And this artist will paint on the egg your makeup and your style and put it in the registry. And that's how they keep it. That's how they keep a record of what your clown is. And it's like a tradition that goes on. But you have to understand, all modern clowns for the past 200 years are based on the Rakshasa representation of Joseph Grimaldi, of Indian demons. That's what they're based on. All of them have come from that root source now. And it's not really changed much since then, to be honest. It's kind of got a bit more refined. The symbol kind of got hijacked a little bit as we go into America after this. So this is British. This is the British inception of the clown. Joseph Grimaldi goes on to live a horrible life. He marries another woman who nursed him after his horrible foot injury. He doesn't really love her, though. He's just with her for convenience. They have a son who grows up in the tradition. The son... gets murdered and is a brute alcoholic and basically dies a horrible death. So Joseph Grimaldi loses another son, and he dies alone and a crippled arthritic who can't move in agony, and broke because he kept having his money stolen by people he trusted who were taking advantage of him. He's a very naive person. Hilarious on stage, sad behind the scenes. Quite stereotypical for a clown, you know, but that's basically his life. He died penniless, broken and alone. All of his years of tumbling on stage had broken his bones basically and caused extreme crippling arthritis. So he suffered till the end, but he was hilarious. I don't think there's ever been a clown like him in history, according to the books. Like nothing will ever compare to the first clown, which was Joseph Grimaldi, as we know. But he's been given the honor of creating the costume of a clown. He didn't. Freemasons did it. He's just been given that to cover it up, basically. When you actually look into where the clown came from, it was Charles Dibdin Jr.
Do you think that part of the Freemasonry? Do you think they give them all these positions, but in order to get that, they either like kind of sacrifice their sons and daughters to these? That's why they ended up horrible deaths and stuff like that. Based off what I've saw with Freemasonry, they kind of tend to do that. I don't know.
Well, I think they keep it in the family, and if you play ball, you benefit and you get rich. But I think there are sacrifices that have to be made to get to higher levels. That's for sure. Right. And I think they're all at varying degrees, and all the varying degrees of knowledge. When you see how Freemasonry works, they don't all know the same things. And I think when you get to the upper echelons, you're basically a Luciferian by that point. You are full on a worshiper of Lucifer.
Just that topic right there just makes me think of Princess Diana for some reason. Wow. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, it could have been. I think every now and then you have to prove your allegiance by taking that step, and it's either you're an asset or a liability to the society. And if you're no longer an asset to them, then they're no use for you. They'll kill you. So you have to continuously prove your worth when you're in one of these societies because you know too much. And if at any moment you're slacking or not providing or continuously proving that you're on their side, well, you're just a liability now. So you end up getting offed and killed. I think that's why a lot of musicians who are in the industry keep playing until they're dead, until they're 90 years old on stage. And it's kind of, why don't you just retire already and go enjoy your grandchildren? Haven't you made enough money? They can't stop. Because as soon as they stop singing the songs and performing the occult magic rituals, they're no longer an asset. And they know what the consequences of that are because they've seen too much, Right. So it's the same principle, but I think back in the day, then these early growing stages of Freemasonry, I think it was very much a family affair. You kept it in the family, and you kept it, and you build your dynasties, And I think they were sharing the wealth a lot back then. So these power players were building civilizations as we know it today. People like Richard Hughes and Charles Dibdin making the first circuses, creating these theatre shows. And you find the tradition spread from Britain, and it went over to the expansionist movement out Western America as well. But I think you'll find a lot of British actors went over to America to try and establish their own theatres, but the theatres kept burning down for some odd reason, and it was just a complete hazard. So a lot of them went bankrupt and came home. And I think rich businessmen in America picked up the tradition of circuses and kind of turned it into a traveling show instead. And I've documented all the names and everything and people involved with that process and that change in style of clowning. And the clown kind of came over with it, and the clown became something that would entertain the crowds while the scene changed, And it was still horse tricks originally, but it kind of became more of a feats of danger, like that's where trapezes get involved, and the circus kind of slowly develops into what we know of today. And you'll find very late in the game, so we're talking like 100 years, maybe I think it's like 1860, 1870 or something like that. Somebody called Phineas Taylor Barnum, P.T. Barnum, gets involved in the game, and he's like 60 years old, so he's late in his own life. And he decides, I'm going to enter the circus business, in America. And by this point, traveling circuses were a thing. Railways were built, and the circus took advantage of this and would use a big top tent. This is where the big top comes in. So rather than a stationary theatre, you started having collapsible tents they could put onto a train and move to the next city and build up again and do it quickly, A lot like the tradition of the Commedia dell'arte in Europe, but a more modernized, streamlined version. And the clown became a traditional staple within it. And I don't think it's a coincidence that every single circus in the early Americas was run by Freemasons. Every single one. Every single one was a Freemason or a Shriner or an Oddfellow or something of the sorts. And they all run every single American circus that existed in that time. And you start to realize something, there's a pattern emerging here. So P.T. Barnum, an Oddfellow, which, by the way, Albert Pike was an Oddfellow, Charlie Chaplin was an Oddfellow, King George V was an Oddfellow. The Oddfellows are a strange mix of extremely famous actors and musicians and extremely powerful world leaders like kings and monarchs and presidents and senators and things like this. It's like, why actors and world leaders in the same club? Could it be they're all actors playing a role? Like, no matter what they are on the stage? Perhaps, But you look into it and you realize, P.T. Barnum, the member of the Oddfellows, he's the guy who got into the game and said, I want it to be bigger. I don't want one ring. Give me the 3-ring circus. Is it a coincidence as well that 3 interlocking rings is the logo for the Oddfellows? That is their logo. It's literally 3 rings locked together. So he's introducing into the circus himself more occult symbolism representing his allegiances. And what is a giant big top with a giant ritualistic circle. And you can start looking at these early circuses and you'll find they all join together as one. All these small traveling circuses, all run by Freemasons, got together and they put on a giant show, a massive show, 1,000-man army show, of actors and troops called King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. And if we told that story, that biblical story, with an epic... everyone was donned in costumes of the time, Babylonian costumes and the rest, you know what I mean? And ancient priest costumes, and there was camels, there was elephants galore, and there was all sorts of stuff going on. It was just this epic tale and story. The posters were made by Bolossi Caralfi, a famous Freemason in London artist. All the costumes were made by the Henderson Arms Company, which doesn't exist anymore, but they made all the costumes for Freemason lodges, all the little aprons they wear, the medallions, all the stuff like that. The backdrops were done by Freemason-affiliated design companies. Everything was Freemason-orientated and involved in this giant performance. All a giant Freemasonic performance. And they love King Solomon. They're obsessed with the guy. They want to rebuild that temple that he built. Solomon's temple is what Freemasons are obsessed with recreating, with the 2 pillars and all this type of stuff. Like, they love Solomon. They think he was the first Freemason. And he's the one. Let's break down the story of King Solomon from the Jewish tradition. He had a magic ring given to him by the angels, and he used that ring to summon demons and use them to help him build his temple. Okay, that's the tale. Now let's look at Freemason lodges. Every Freemason lodge is run by the Grand Worshipful Master, and it is only the Worshipful Grand Master who's allowed to wear a hat, traditionally a black top hat. No one else is allowed to wear one. And they'll tell you on their website, even today, what that means. The hat represents the crown of Solomon. Okay, they'll tell you. It's not hidden. It's not a secret. It's not even a cult. They just tell you on the website now. Go look at it. It's there on the website openly. What Freemason symbols mean. The black top hat, crown of Solomon, they'll tell you. So let's look at the ringleader of a circus. The Lord of the Ring, the ringleader, wearing a black top hat, right? King Solomon, the Lord of the Ring, orchestrating the ritual, which is the circus performance. And what does he control in the circus performance? He controls clowns, which are an analog for demons, which he used to build his temple with. So an entire circus performance is an analog for Solomonic demon summoning rituals.
Well, no wonder
there
I felt
you have
weird
it.
going to it. Yep. I was,
Golly.
as a kid, I hated that, man, going into circuses. I always got this weird vibe, and I felt very uncomfortable. The whole clown shtick was just kind of weird to me. I had no idea. There's a reason people, like, kids are scared of clowns, man. And I feel like it's the demonic presence that it literally and spiritually brings in. I don't know.
Exactly. Yeah, but yeah. I think ignorance of the spiritual law doesn't make you immune to the spiritual law. It's kind of like, well, I don't believe in diseases. It doesn't mean you're not going to catch a disease. You know what I mean? It's kind of, if you dress like a clown, you're playing with fire, you're going to get demons.
Right,
That's what will happen. That's what the point of that costume is for. The clown costume is just a westernized version of ancestor spirit worship costumes in their rituals everywhere else on the earth. Okay, and the back end, well, the book I'm writing now, Volume 2, is going into those cultures all around the earth that dress in their ritualistic dresses and masks and do their dances and rituals and sacrifices. What they wear is exactly like what we would call a clown, but it's their version using their materials.
Right. Well,
their
it's different cultures, same spirit,
Exactly. Yeah.
And I mean, that's how this stuff sticks. That's just how that this is real. Mm-hmm. And the one thing that I find real fascinating is that people today, I say this so many times on the show, but I'm going to say it again, like the occult and the practices of the occult are so normalized today, people can't discern whether it's, of evil origins or if it's just the fact that, you're just sending emojis to people through text messages. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something to it when, especially there's some demonological books. There's some other books where it talks about King Solomon and his sigils and all this kind of stuff, where you take these sigils, you compare them to like emojis in our time today, and you can line them up and go, oh my goodness, like, is it a demon sigil? Is it, now, correct me if I'm wrong, but sigils are kind of like, it's artwork to act as a portal, right? Is this something that kind of...
Yeah, sigils are personally created images that represent a spiritual concept which you can form in your own mind and make a connection to the spirit realm with. So what you do is you visualize in your mind a spiritual concept, let's say a specific demon you want to get in touch with, and you will create a sigil while thinking about that demon. And then you've created a physical representation symbolically of that thing in the spirit realm. When you create a mirror of something in the spirit realm, you create a channel, therefore allow it in. Yeah, so it's magic. It's dark occult magic. And I only know this because I literally at university, I wouldn't say befriended, more he wouldn't leave me alone. It's one of these situations. I attract weird people, always have done. And I ended up attracting this outspoken Aleister Crowleyan occultist. And he would tell me... He'd tell me about sigils, you know what I mean, and how they work. So that's the only reason I know. And yeah, it's a very personal thing. But so a lot of these old sigils from like the Goetia and things like this, they specifically represent specific demons. Yeah.
So it's like their version of manifesting things. It's like modern witchcraft is like, I'm manifesting my destiny type.
Oh yeah.
Same principle, same concept, just recycled.
Absolutely that.
Absolutely, right. I think a big thing too is like you have all these energy bombs going off. People can't see it, and it's because there's all this ritualistic occult practice that people are doing every day. And maybe the world would be a better place if the occult wasn't as normalized as it is today, and people are just pushing these energy bombs and they're
maybe the Amish and the Puritans had it right. Maybe we should have artwork or electronic. Yeah, yes. That's the thing. Yeah, it's dark, but imagine that on a grand scale back in the day with these circuses. So everything's a symbol for something. The clown's a symbol for a demon. You got the Grand Master, the Ring Master is the analog for Solomon. And then you've got everyone coming to watch the ritual and get in the circle, and then the performance happens, the summoning ritual happens, and then everybody's giving their energy to it in one giant circular tent with these weird striped lines everywhere. And you have to remember, the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim are trapped in the physical realm. And I think when people take psychedelics and DMT, they just see more of the physical realm. They're not going to a special place. They're just becoming more and more aware of what's actually here, and it looks nuts and crazy. I think there's a spirit world right here on Earth with us, tandem to our physical realm. In fact, they are the same place. It's like a coin, two sides to a coin, We live on the top of this, and the spirit realm... Well, maybe we live on the more bland side, and the spirit realm's underneath like this, you know what I mean? But it's the same thing. It's the same creation.
The upside down.
Yeah, something like that.
Stranger Things.
Well, so you're saying that Earth is flat.
Yes.
This guy.
I am a biblical cosmologist, so I would say it's definitely an enclosed system at least. But anyway, moving on from that's a whole other podcast.
But awesome.
I agree with you. Don't worry.
yeah. Moving on from that, it's kind of they have the warp to the woof to reality, and the Nephilim are on the other side. They're still here on Earth. We just don't perceive them because we have a very limited bandwidth of the color spectrum that we perceive. When you take psychedelics, you're basically opening up the pupils and letting more information in. You're just seeing more of what is rather than going to special places. I like to think of it as you're witnessing the plumbing of the universe. It's perfectly natural. You need that stuff going on behind the scenes to make this reality happen. But that's the place of disembodied form. So it's loosey, it's goosey. There's no solidity to any of it. There's no bodies, and I think spirits are trapped there, kind of melding into each other and disembodied. They have all these urges but no senses to deal with them. They hunger, they thirst, they have desires and drives, but they don't have fingers or mouths or noses or ears or eyes to sense things and experience things. They are desperate to get out of this eternity of torture with no body, so they want your body.
Sounds like hell.
It's hell. It's hell to them. Yeah, it is. But these people take DMT, like, oh, I'm going to this cool place full of these crazy jesters, man. Isn't it so cool? It's awesome. And it's like, it's hell to them. You get to go back after 10 minutes. Could you imagine an eternity there? I don't think you could you? You know what I mean? But 10 minutes. 10 minutes is 10 minutes. Wow, but we get to come back to our bodies. They are not privileged enough to have that. They don't have that anymore. They don't have bodies anymore. They were wiped out. Yeah. And this is why we have possession. This is why we have people out there dressing like jesters and clowns to channel them in these shamanistic rituals. And it's a transactional deal. You make a deal with the devil. You make a deal with the demon. Okay, demon, come into my body. I'm going to drink the blood, smoke the cigars, drink the alcohol, have the orgy while you're in my body. And you get to feel and sense all of those things vicariously through my fingers, through my eyes, through my nose, through my taste buds, through my senses. And you get to feel those pleasures you crave so much. But as a deal, I want power. I want the strength of 10 men. I want to be able to cut and not bleed. I want to be able to levitate. I want to be able to read people's minds. I want power in exchange for you using my body for your pleasure. And that's possession. That's willing possession. That's a transactional deal these cultures all over the earth are continuously making. Right? It's just in the West, we're a highly Christianized area of the world, the demons can't do it. They can't be so open and brash about it.
Right.
It has to be occult here. They have to find a sneakier way of getting into our bodies, because we're not just going to be openly willing to making contracts with demons. So we have occultists who do it in secret, like the Freemasons or Aleister Crowley or whatever, whatever occult clan is out there who's doing these odd things, these rituals to get demons to turn up and go, right, demon, come on, make the deal. I want power, come into my body, but don't tell anybody because they'll know and they'll ostracize me from society because there's Christians everywhere. And heaven forbid the demon gets exposed by a real Christian, and the Christian does what? Cast it out in the name of Jesus Christ with all authority.
Amen.
Too dangerous. That's not optimal for a demon. It's best not to be known that you're there. It's best to stay hidden. So you find a lot of people are possessed by demons, and they don't know it. They're being subtly influenced every single day by demons that are within them to do things that they wouldn't choose to do themselves, to sin repeatedly, to have odd lusts and desires, because the demon in them wants the vessel to do those things so they can feel it, so they can experience those things. Okay? Now, the clown is just a quick way of opening people up to more demons so they can get this done more readily. And, every year, there's a new reboot of The Joker or It or something clown related. There's a new clown serial killer, whether it's Itchy the Clown in the 90s or you've got Art the Clown now,
Richie the Barber.
I'm not even going to go there. But there's always a reiteration or a reboot of a clown-like figure to get everyone dressing like it for Halloween every year. There'll always be a new popularization of that image. Because they want people to identify with the clown and dress that way. It's all about getting more and more people to dress like clowns. Because the more people you can get dressing in clown-like features, pale white skin, red hair, psychedelic clothing, the more portals you're opening for demons to readily get into people's vessels. It's that simple, and there's no complicated matter behind it. We're living in clown world now. They have popularized the clown to the point where people are willingly clowning themselves up as a legitimate fashion choice and going outside walking around that way on a day-to-day basis. It's called clowncore fashion. Very popular with Gen Z. It's a real thing. It's growing rapidly, and you have to understand that they've been played by Freemasons and the occult to do that. Even in 2023 at the start, Elle fashion magazine, all the French and Spanish catwalks, official high-end fashion here, clown aesthetic. They're all walking down catwalks dressed like clowns, and it's kind of why that's ridiculous, right? But then you understand what we get in the outlet stores trickles down from these outrageous catwalk costumes, and we get like a watered down version of it, but you're still getting more and more people to dress like a clown in a legitimate way. And it's subtle because we don't know in the West that the clown represents a demon. What is a clown to us? Something fun and silly for the kids. That's the perfect disguise. We'll never question it. We'll never know that that's what we're dealing with. But make no mistake, historically, the clown is a representation of Indian Rakshasa demons. And it's in spirit and in form. It is the replacement for the British Harlequin, Wildman, beast, demon. It's always been a representation of demons.
A practice that I've seen that is becoming, I mean, it's becoming so normalized now, and it's all to do with sorcery. It's all to do with pharmakia. You've got the mushroom community, right, is growing. These things are becoming, on a legal standpoint, where people are, honestly, they can't get through their day without microdosing daily. And another thing, especially here in Florida, that's been kind of on the uprise, and it's new, and it's these ketamine IV therapy sessions where people are using these drugs to get off of addiction, and they're getting the help from the spirit realm, and they don't even know it. I think it's where these jinn, or these befriending, oppressing entities, are helping you with what it is you want to accomplish. And I say that like with 100% certainty, because I have a buddy of mine, and he was getting through school, and he started having these experiences where he was doing mushrooms, every day, or at least 2-3 times a week, and he would always increase his dose. And the big thing was that he was using these entities that were consistent every time he would go into this different conscious realm, right? And they were there to help him. They were there to help him for his tests. They were there to help him and literally move his body at some points when he's doing like things that are practical. Mm-hmm. And
wasn't it the same? He saw the same lady every time, or something like that.
Well, he saw the same 3 entities every single time. And so when he was doing these things, I still know him. I'm still his friend. And I was like, hey, ask him about Jesus. Like, do that.
Yeah.
Test the spirit. And so he was like, okay. And I've been, not preaching to him, but I've just been sharing the gospel to him a lot. And the fact that this unseen realm is 100% real, and it's not what he's being deceived to think that it is. And so he did test the spirit one day, and it immediately, just like a vapor, disappeared in the middle of his trip. And he called it out, right? And he's like, like, what? Isn't that so interesting, right? Isn't that so interesting? He's like telling me he's saying this to the entities that were there normally, right? And so they vanished, and they came back, and they said, oh, we have all the questions that you're seeking about God, but you have to like believe in what we're telling you about it. And so I was like, oh, wow, okay. So it knows what it's doing, and it doesn't like being called out in a way. So I just wanted to share that with you.
Oh, absolutely. That's I've heard that story plenty of times. I mean, I come out of the psychedelic community myself. Like, that's kind of my background before I was saved. I was microdosing LSD, on a daily basis. I've done DMT a few times, in between. I was constantly experimenting with things like MDMA. I did ketamine a few times and other drugs. I mean, I was a stereotypical art student. That's what I was doing at the time. I was living that life, and very much a spiritualist type of guy. I won't call myself New Age necessarily. I was never really like a hippie, but more of a Gnostic, alchemical type. I went down the intellectual route, thinking I was so wise and intelligent at the time. Like, I cringe at it now looking back, but I was looking for something. I was looking for answers. I wanted to know God. I wanted to understand what was going on in the world, and I was looking for the spirit realm. Is it true? Is it real? So I unequivocally know there's a spirit realm. I've seen it. And you can't unsee something like that, and it was easy for me to get to Jesus after that, after witnessing that proof. And I thank God that he pulled me out of it. And, I haven't touched anything like that in over a decade, and I'm done with it, and I'm completely sorry. I don't even drink. I suppose caffeine's my worst addiction now that I'm still working on, and I'll get there in the end. But that's it, But I was everything else prior to that. And my book is, I did a chapter at the end of it called The Psychedelic Testimony, and it's a love letter to the psychedelic community to let them know, listen, you're not going somewhere special when you take these drugs. The information you're getting from the entities there is nonsense, with a G in front. It's Gnostic nonsense. The DMT jesters are not your friends. They're not some psychological Jungian representation of the human shadow that you need to integrate in order to better yourself as a person. They are separate, tangible entities from you with a reason for being there. They are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, which look like clowns in physical form, now look like wide-grinning jesters in spiritual form. They have an agenda, They hate you. They're using you. And it's been well received and not well received, but that's the message. Like, these are not your friends, and you're not going somewhere special when you take these chemicals. There's no answers at the bottom of that barrel. Turn to Christ, turn to God, ask and you'll receive. You want to know God, you want to know true spiritualism, go and get it, but you're not going to find it through these means. There's nothing there. No.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important message, because I think these entities, they've given us the keys to furthering our consciousness, or opening up that door to where there's like this astral realm people can mess around in. And I think it's not only I think they gave that to us not only because we're curious as humans, right? I mean, even just look at the garden, like there was a lot of curiosity going on there. But I also think that they're masters at achieving their plan. And I think the plan is to really break down the integrity of your consciousness, because a lot of that stems to where, like the Bible says, like, be sober, right? And I think it's because there's a lot of things that Christ has intended for us, and it's a part of his will, and these enemies just want to break us down so that we can't really fulfill or get to the point to where God's potential, wants us to be at.
I would say, I don't think there's anything intrinsically evil about the spirit realm. Like, I think, like I explained, it's a perfectly natural place that needs to exist for this place to exist. It's like the wiring behind the projection of our reality. You need the wiring in order for there to be a reality. There wouldn't be anything without the spirit realm, because it is the same place, And I think there was a time where we could see it, where it was completely integrated with our visual perception, and we were one with it, And I think that was before the flood of Noah. And I think when a rainbow was put in the sky, I think that was an indication, because there's never been a rainbow before that flood. Why? Is it because perhaps now we're limited to a color bandwidth?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I agree with it too, because like when you're
why limit though? Why limit? Well, now there's demons everywhere. It's probably not a good idea to be perceiving that realm anymore. It's infested. It's infested. Yeah. There's a ghost in the machine. There's parasites in the machine.
Like I think that answers the question with a lot of atheists and just a lot of agnostics, where they're like, well, if, God's real, well, how come I can't see him? How come he doesn't just appear, and all this kind of stuff? And I think there's just that limiting factor that kind of came in after, like what you're saying, so that we're put in the place where we're supposed to be. And
well, it's mercy, because otherwise, look, you create a flood to get rid of the chimera humans and the remaining Nephilim. Well, it would all have been for nothing if you could still perceive them in spiritual form afterwards, because they can still influence you and tell you what to do and manipulate you, whether they're physically embodied or not, So it's more ideal for God to limit our perception so we can't even see them anymore, and they can't interact with us in a physical capacity, because then we're no longer being influenced by them. And we would have to go out of our way to get influenced by them. And there are people today who have learned how to go out of their way to get in contact with these entities. And, drugs is one of them, but costume is another. There's many ways, and I'm just telling you about one occult practice here, the art of costumes.
I think God's protecting us from all that in general. There's people who are like, oh, I want to be a spiritualist, but that spirit realm originated, it is God's creation, but unfortunately when the flood came and passed away all that, now there's these demonic spirits from the Nephilim all up in there, and then they see you coming in there made in the image of God, astral projecting yourself or whatever they through drugs, and they just attach you like a moth to a flame. Like they're just, it's just.
And they'll tell you anything. They'll tell you what you want to hear. Like, well, we're ascended masters from the fifth dimension here to help you reach your consciousness. We're from the future here to guide you in your next step of evolution. Or, I don't know, we're from the Pleiades galaxy. We're aliens here beaming straight to your consciousness to help you ascend to the fifth dimension. It's kind of, they'll say whatever they need to say that appeals to your particular sensibilities for you to let them into your body. And that's the game
they're eat it up too. They love that, man. Like now, they're a great deception, and they're gonna eat that stuff up when these star gods come down again.
Oh yeah, well, the New Age religion is prepping people for the eventuality where they can get these Nephilim spirits back to our side, and they're going to be posing as something else, like I said, interdimensionals probably, or aliens or something along those lines. But they're very terrestrial. They've been here a long time, and they have an agenda that they're working at, and they're very patient. They've got time. They've got nothing but time, in fact. They've been there for thousands of years. They're not stupid. They know how we work. They know how we tick. They know what we want. They know how to play us, so we have to be vigilant. We have to be very careful. We have to get wise as serpents to understand how the serpents are working against us, basically. So I'm just giving one technique here that they use.
Right.
And be careful what you wear. It means things, it's important.
I think this is the danger, too, of artificial intelligence. I wanted to get your thoughts on this because at least my perspective is that we're creating these vessels, we're creating these outlets for these Nephilim spirits to be able to, one day live through or channel through.
Well, one day or already, to some extent.
Right.
Yeah, I think AI is one facet of a multifaceted agenda at play. So I think the point of AI is to create a brain, a functioning copy of a human brain with neurons that fire, that is completely synthetic, and it thinks and can reason like humans, but better. Far faster, far more. But it's going to be more of a computerized holographic brain of sorts, but it functions like a brain. And then that brain can now house consciousness. Because that's what we do. Our bodies are made in the image of God, and our body in tandem with all organs, not just the brain. It's all one connection. You can't have one without the other. We're not like vehicles where people think you can just take one thing out and put another one in and it's fine, or replace an organ. There's consequences to that because your body is divine and everything's a part of it. So I think if they can create a vessel that can house consciousness, the brain being just one part of it, which AI is working on. You got transhumanists working on the body. Trying to build robots and everything else in between, and biological robots, and they're building like biological cells now and matter in their own way, fake meat and all this type of stuff. They're working on building synthetics, we'll call them, like Fallout, It's kind of something like a human, but not something completely synthetic. AI is just one facet of creating this new body, this new vessel to house consciousness, because the problem is with demons now, they keep coming into our vessels, but it's messy. They can't quite control us because we're in there with them. They can influence, and they can sometimes take full control, but I don't think it's as good as having their own body. And also, it's not optimal because we can cast them out at any moment as soon as we realize the truth. And they're constantly being cast out and wandering in dry places again. It's like, I've got to do it again now. I've got to find another body, and they're sick of it, So if we can give them, if the humans who are working with them in these agendas can give them a vessel that is simply just for them to be housed in, who's going to cast them out now? You know what I mean? It's we probably still could externally, but no one's in that vessel fighting with them anymore. So that's the benefits of creating a new body. And I think AI is just one facet of this multifaceted.
That's where Elon Musk comes in.
Oh yeah.
He's going to give them robot bodies and everything, right?
Well, I think Elon Musk is a bit of a fraud, to be honest. I don't think he does half the stuff he says he's doing.
Absolutely not. Especially if you play the game like Diablo and you're like level whatever.
Yeah.
He's like ranked top in the world.
Like that game is way more. It's like so much more like sophisticated than.
People behind the scenes of creating the technologies. He's just the front man who's supposedly doing it all, but he's not
guy.
He spends his day playing video games while pretending to be a super genius, on the media, on social media.
Right.
I think he's probably nothing like that, and I think it's just like, for example, Trump isn't really in control. There's always a hidden hand behind everything. It's like it's the same with Elon. He's not really the guy making rockets to Mars, even, which is questionable anyway, or making advancements in robotics, or he's such a genius, he created all these wonderful things like electric cars. There's other people doing that, and it's
nepotism just behind all of it, right?
He's the figurehead. Yeah, he's the figurehead. He's just the guy who represents that movement,
was chosen for that position. It kind of brings it all together here when you talk about nepotism in Freemasons and how they all began as actors and musicians way back when.
They're all actors.
Yeah,
even today,
they signal it, right? Exactly. This is where I'm going with this. They signal to each other, and then we always talk. We bring this up almost every episode. We always talk about how Hollywood always tries to give you signals, and you talk about AI creating a brain. Makes me think of iRobot. Well, it became conscious and then tried to take over, killed its creator. Vicky and Eagle Eye and so on and so forth, and it just makes me
Skynet.
think it's these Freemasons, these people that have been running the show the whole time, kind of giving you insight on their plans.
In a way, yeah. Well, I think there is a level of predictive programming. They want you to react a certain way when things like that do happen. So the films teach you how the proper way to react to those events actually is. There's that element. Some people think there's like a karmic element to it, where they have to tell you what their plan is before it happens, so they can karmically absolve themselves of any responsibility. So legally speaking, they're not in trouble from God. You made the choice. We told you, that type of thing.
Karmic law, free will.
But I think you can't pull the wool over God's eyes. I'm sorry. I think that's a joke. I don't think they've got any chance of pulling that off in reality.
I used to think that as well.
Yeah.
I really did used to
think
think
it's
that.
convoluted. I think it's a convoluted excuse, to be honest.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, they may think that way, but like
They might
that's
believe
not
it, yeah.
how it works.
God's got to handle
That's not how it
business,
works.
though. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, it's like the serpent in the garden tried the same tactic, didn't he?
I was innocent.
It's like, well, she's the one who ate the apple. You know what I mean? No,
Technically, actually, guys.
everyone's like pushing the blame. It's like, she made me eat. It's like, no, the snake made me eat, and the snake's just sat there like didn't say anything. It's like, yeah, it's like,
Right.
What did I do? What did I do? I didn't do anything. They I didn't eat the apple. They did. It's that kind of thing. But even God was like, nah, like, wander on your belly for the rest of your life, and I'm putting enmity between your seed and their seed, and I'm going to crush your skull. And it's kind of like, you ain't getting away with it. It's not that easy. You know what I mean? And I think it's sad that people believe they could have such a power over God. Like, he isn't omnipotent and doesn't see everything that's going on and know the heart.
Right.
But that's the delusion a lot of these occultists are under. They actually think they're gods themselves. They think they can create their own universes and have dominion over everything themselves. And it's pride and hubris at its finest. A lot of people I think they give too much credit to a lot of these leaders. They think they're super intelligent and so like ahead of us in the game. But I think that they're actually just prideful idiots who are being played by spiritual wickedness in high places. And they're actually not very intelligent. I really don't think they are that smart. I think they're actually, the reason they're being used so much is because they are stupid. And it's kind of, that's how useful they are, because they're idiots who aren't thinking.
Useful idiots.
Past their own lusts, you know what I mean? And their own immediate gratification desires. But they're presented to us as heroes and rulers and geniuses and everything else. And that's kind of their reward for playing ball as well. It's but the whole world's a stage. And they're actors on it,
I agree, man.
The occult are in charge of just putting on a show for us. It's Freemasonic theatre, as I like to call it. And it's always been the story of the clown costume, for example, and the Oddfellows being involved in creating the circuses. All the members of the Oddfellows are world leaders and famous actors, because they're all the same thing. Whether you're playing a role on the world stage or a role on the theatre stage, you're playing a role that's molding the minds of peoples and their realities and locking them into a scripted reality that you've created for them to follow. That's what magic is. It's art. People don't realize this. People think it's sparks flying out of wooden sticks. It's not. It's just art. Art is magic. The occult work with art. What does Hollywood do? It creates art. That's what it's doing, and art influences. And that's all magic really is. Getting people to do things without touching them. And how do you do that? You influence them with words. You spell words. You broadcast your spell over many people. You know what I mean? It's kind of, it's just art. And people need to realize that,
It's obvious when you know the Bible and you see the world the way we do. Especially when I came across this verse, and this verse was, I think, Psalm 2. And it's where it talks about, the kings of the earth set themselves and take rulers, the rulers and the kings, they take themselves and they set a council against the Lord, and it's just, when I read that verse, I was like, oh my gosh, did it just say like that? No matter what we think, no matter what the news says, they're all in on this together, like no matter what. And it's blatantly obvious now, especially when we just seeing how everyone was fooled by, especially the good cop, bad cop strategy that we saw with the Democratic Party versus now the Republican Party coming in as like the heroes and the saviors and all this kind of stuff. It's just the good cop, bad cop idea, that kind of, typology or whatever it is.
Two wings of the same bird.
Exactly. Yeah, and now look, now look what's going on, right? We have Project Stargate, right? $500 billion funding, which is, the biggest AI control or engine, basically Eagle Eye, that's going to be established in the United States. And they're preaching safety by it, and they're preaching, security by it, and all this kind of stuff. And another interesting thing is that Oracle is the AI that's going to be monitoring, or watch how many more cameras get put out on the streets or outside of businesses or corporations. And I think there's a big thing of censorship that might be coming. It kind of, like, to touch on what you said earlier, where God is omniscient, right? Well, I think that the devil wants to do the same thing. He just can't. He doesn't have that luxury or that ability to do that, right? But he wants to be like the Most High, right? He wants to exalt himself above the stars, and he wants to be God. And I think in our reality, in our physical realm, time, space, matter, that's what that's going to look like, is AI governing, watching everything, being omniscient. I mean, it all starts with
it's
with
anything
data.
I've learned. If anything that I've learned, just being in the game for like a decade, the counterfeit to God's creation, which Lucifer and Satan and the adversary, whatever name you want to give them as a group, collective, or single entity, what they're trying to do, like I said, is be as God and proclaim themselves to be God on the throne of God above all, and be the God of this world. Their counterfeit is done through technology. That's how it's being done. They're trying to mimic what God can do with biology and quantum reality and way beyond anything physical, but they're trying to recreate a facsimile of that through technology. And that's
trying to create the AI God. They're trying to create Skynet, and they're going to embody that, I believe, by putting these, iRobot looking things. Like, they're going to start introducing them to people's homes as like, oh, it's going to help, disabled people do this and that and that. They're going to slowly creep it into society, which they're already doing. And then they're just going to have a complete, like, AI brain within that thing walking amongst us. And it's going to be like, they're going to put us in these 15-minute cities. And then while that's going on, I think they're going to introduce, like, the Great Delusion with the whole alien deception thing too. It'll be one big.
Hey, be careful, buddy. We got a little seasoness here.
Maybe we might be threatened with that, certainly, and the fear of that happening is always going to be prevalent in our minds.
Yeah,
but
I can see that. Yes,
I feel like you deceive people by making them feel like they've won. That's how you deceive people.
Sure.
Okay, and people who are deceived don't know they've been deceived. That's the point. They think everything's okay, everything's perfect, everything's as it should be. And I imagine the threat of all these horrible things, like living in the pod, eating the bugs, 15-minute cities, you will own nothing and be happy, all this type of stuff.
You eat the bugs,
Yeah, it's not going to come to fruition. Trump's going to bring in a golden age, don't you know? It's going to be the opposite. You're going to get given everything you ever wanted that counters all these horrible agendas we've been under threat by the liberal left wing, the globalists for so long. You know what I mean? Whatever it is, but it's kind of like it's a ghost. It's a boogeyman. It was built to fall. That's how these people do things, right? They build things to destroy them. Exactly. Yeah. So I think what we're going to get is a prosperous time of wonder, but that's the point. We'll be so invested in the world that we're going to forget about God, and that's when they've got us. Wow. So we have to be careful with this. We have to always keep eye out. The temptations are going to be what gets us. It's not going to be the tribulation like most people are waiting for and expecting.
It's interesting. This whole little season thing is very interesting, and it's on the table for me, right? The way I see it is taking both of those concepts, right? You have tribulation, wrath, and then you've got the area where Satan is loosened out of prison, pretty much, and he goes out to deceive the nations yet again. Mm-hmm. He's just going and doing the same agenda that he may have done in the tribulation time, too, when he goes ahead and does it to build the world to fight against God in the Battle of Armageddon. Mm-hmm. I think both concepts call for a one world currency. I think both call for a one world government. And I think both call for some type of one world belief system, if that's either a religion or whatever you want to call it. But I think both share properties where he's going to just come back and and all right, this is the plan. This is the plan because it works.
He's
right,
picking
for
up
him.
where he left off. That's for sure.
Sure.
You know what I have a hunch with is, I'm sorry to cut you off, but it's just like, I think that golden age thing is what you're saying. It is going to be true. I do believe that, but I think we're going to have such a time of that, and people are going to get so invested into it that eventually when stuff does hit the fan, they're just going to pull the rug from everybody. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Because this little season stuff to me is very interesting too. I've heard it. You know, we've had a couple of people on, and I keep an open mind with everything, you know. But
I think we'll still get played out something similar to a tribulation style series of events. Absolutely. I think nothing's new under the sun still. I think the devil doesn't have any new tricks. You know what I mean? I think he's
Right.
Well, order out of chaos, right?
And plus, don't forget, even if what I'm saying is true, that we are past all the tribulation that happened and the millennial reign's already happened and we're in the little season, he's trying to convince the world that we're still in tribulation. So he's going to make a lot of things happen that are going to look identical to tribulation come upon us. There's going to be wars, earthquakes in diverse places. The third of the sea is going to die. It's going to look like we're having the veiled judgment, the vile judgment pouring out on us. It's going to like the wrath of God is coming down. But don't forget, these people can control the weather. Through technological means, they're doing what God can do with technology instead. So they're going to use HARP, they're going to use frequencies, geoengineering to mimic what God is capable of doing. Do you get what I mean? So it's a carbon. So it's kind of like, all right, so God did his thing, watch me do the exact same thing. Your God's so great, I can do it too. That's what
the devil does. He can only
that's what the devil does, yeah. But the little season's his time to kind of do what God did. Do you know what I mean? His version. It's like I'm gonna do it too. You know.
Right. I can see both sides, man. I really can. I see both sides of this these views, man.
It's interesting. I'm glad it got brought up to my attention, and that it's something that I've put some thought into, because that Revelation 20, right? I think that's where it talks about it. I could be wrong, but man, it's going to be an extremely deceptive time, and a lot of people are not going to know what's going on. It's good to keep it on the table, like I said.
I think that's what I believe it. I'm pretty, because I'm the guy who's talking about it online, you know what I mean? And I'm pretty set that, okay, this is what happened. This is where we are. You don't have to believe me. Just please keep it under your belt as a possibility at least. Okay? Because you're not any less of a brother or sister in Christ in my eyes, whether you think you're tribulation or post. We're all in this together at the end of the day. Whatever comes. But you need to know the possibilities of, and this is a possibility at least.
Right.
That this could be the case. If you don't want to be deceived, you want a good place in the kingdom, then do it right. You know what I mean? Know what the truth is.
Amen.
And be ready with the truth when it presents itself. Because we don't know how things are going to go down. We don't. Right. And if tribulation doesn't play out, as the book tells us, how many people are going to lose their faith?
Right.
But if we can quickly say, brothers and sisters, it's because we're not in that time. We're in the little season of Satan. That's why tribulation didn't play out by the book. Because we're not in that time. Don't lose faith. This is a trick. Okay, what's coming next is the Gog-Magog war. Then we can pivot and redirect. Or if people have at least humoured this idea before, they can recontextualize in the moment when, I don't know, Armageddon doesn't come upon them as they thought it would, or Christ doesn't return, or whatever happens. At least they can understand what's really going on and recontextualize fast enough to keep their faith. I'm not trying to make people lose their faith now. Don't go and take a mark of the beast if one turns up. Of course. That's like Christianity 101. Right? We know these basic things. And just because I'm saying, well, the mark of the beast technically would have already come, doesn't mean I'm saying go and take another version of it today. Of course we're not saying that. We don't suddenly become absolute morons just because we've considered a different eschatology. Don't take anything akin to the mark of the beast.
People take the implications that you guys, at least it seems like people take that you're implying this, and it's not that way, No,
I just want people to be...
It's biblical. It's all very biblical stuff.
I don't want people to be caught off guard.
I think it's an intellectual way of looking at all this, to be honest with you. I think it's a smart way to look at all this, right? You can't just be so single-minded. So
you've got to know all possibilities. Go, yeah.
Does it? So I'm pretty new to this whole little season thing, but I want to know. Okay, so looking at it from your perspective, what is the goal? Obviously, besides leading people to Jesus, if we are indeed in this golden era time, what is our role, and what is the next thing that's going to happen in this time period for us in 2025 here?
Okay, well, it's first of all, this whole going into a golden age thing is a red herring. We're not going. We are in the little season of Satan, and that's it. Biblically speaking, okay. There is no golden age to come.
Right.
Within the little season. Okay, there's only the new heaven and earth after this. That's when the new heaven and earth truly exists. So a lot of people in the futurist eschatology, they think after Armageddon, Christ descends from heaven, judgment, new heaven and earth for eternity. And they think the millennial reign is a symbolic reign which represents eternity, where those who are chosen get resurrected and get to live with Christ forever, you know. That's a very childish, basic understanding of those events that doesn't even actually reflect what the book actually tells them. Yeah. What it says is, after Armageddon, the devil's bound for 1,000 years. That's where we get the 1,000 years of peace from. During those 1,000 years, the saints are resurrected who died and were martyred for Christ in those early periods of Armageddon, around 70 AD. That period, you know. We don't know an exact date, but around that time. Mm-hmm. They get resurrected along with, you know, the apostles and everyone throughout history who died in Christ, you know, and all the saints. We're talking about the people with the halos represented in all the churches, you know, saints, martyrs for Christ. They get to reign with Christ for 1,000 years over the survivors of tribulation, which will be like 10%, if that, you know, and they have to rebuild civilization for 1,000 years. But it's a time of peace where the devil isn't around anymore. It's a true golden age where humanity is no longer held back by the adversary, whispering in people's ears, turning kingdoms against each other, you know, and bringing out the worst in people, tempting people. It's done with. All you've got are the saints and Christ ruling over people, quite literally directing them in the correct way to be. It's a kingdom. It's not a democracy, you know, but the king is the son of God. He doesn't get much better than that, more righteous than that, more fair than that. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And that's 1,000 years. That's the millennial reign that people want. It's the 1,000 years of Satan being locked up. But it does say, when the 1,000 years has ended, it's there in black and white. It ends.
Right.
It's not eternal. That particular time period runs out. The devil is let loose for a short season, and he goes to the four corners of the earth to gather an army whose number is of the sands of the sea, Gog and Magog, to make war with the beloved city, and to march up the breadth of the earth and surround the camp of saints, to which fire rains down from heaven as the holy city, New Jerusalem, descends, and they all get destroyed. Everyone who made war with the camp of saints, somewhere on earth, wherever that is, who joined Satan's army, who was deceived to join his army, they all get obliterated by fire. And that's it then. New Jerusalem descends from heaven, judgment. All the dead are resurrected. Everyone who's ever lived throughout all existence.
World War Z, baby.
From the start to the beginning is before the great white throne of God. But obviously there's the judgment seat with Christ if you were covered in the blood of the Lamb as well. Everyone gets judged on their works by that point, it says. Now you have to understand, everybody, including Christians, get judged on their works. But as long as you're covered by the blood of Christ, you're just getting judged on where you get to be in the kingdom. You're still saved. But everyone else is getting judged by the law. And they all failed. And they don't have the covering of Christ to protect them for what's coming next.
Interesting.
And that's what the
I tell you what, we're gotta get you on for another show, and we gotta get down to the bottom of this. I did get in touch with JT. He's another guy who kind of puts out content about this topic. So yeah, I think it's very interesting. I want to talk about it more with you guys, and so we'll have to set that up in the future. But everyone, Paul Stobbs, Paul, let them know where they can find you. And your book as well.
Sure. Well, like I said, when it comes to this book, we only scratched the surface today. Again, it keeps going and going and going and going. I've done hundreds of podcasts fleshing this out. If you go to my channel, the Nephilim Look Like Clowns playlist, you'll find there's a lot of them there where there's images to back up everything I'm saying. Yeah, I've been doing this for like over 8 years with this topic, so there's a lot of content out there. You can watch the 44-episode series as well, which is more succinct. The more later episodes are way better than the first episodes. The first episodes are the ramblings of a madman who's just discovered something for the first time. But the later episodes are way more refined and put together. And I'm writing the book by that point, so you can see it clearly in the work. So go check out the series, work backwards, maybe, rather from episode 1, start with 44 instead. So that's that work. If you want to go check that out, you can get the book on Amazon. It looks like this. You can't miss it. But yeah, I'm also the guy who's known for the millennial reign stuff, which we touched on again today. JT, Joe is my bro. We're together on Instagram chat all the time with Vitali. We've collaborated on this many times. It's a growing movement. We're doing it humbly. We're doing it with an open mind. We're not saying we know it all. We certainly don't. We're ironing it out. We have theories and ideas, but it's based on the words of Jesus himself. That's why we do this. Okay, we're not just making this up, and it is biblically grounded. Okay, it just goes against everything you've been taught in church. That's all. So we're conspiracy theorists first and foremost. Well, I'm a Christian first and foremost, but conspiracy theorist comes a very close second, and that changes Christianity when you're a conspiracy theorist, and you will end up where we are if you're really looking. I will say that much. But just check it out. I've got a playlist of that as well. And I suppose that's all I can really say for now. I guess I'll come back and we'll discuss the little season sometime.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Sounds good, man. Well, thank you for expressing your book with us in a little 2-part little series here. And I think we sold it good enough for people to go out there and really check it out and give it a read and dig deeper into the topics that we talked about. But, again, brother, appreciate you coming on. And, we'll see you in the future. All right.
Thanks for having me, guys. God bless.
All right, man. Biblical Hitmen.
Wow.
Debrief.
Wow.
No, thanks, Paul, man. Wow. Another banger, brother. And awesome stuff. Dude, I didn't know the clown history was so in-depth like that.
Incredible, bro.
Yeah. It was awesome. And my gosh, he must memorize his book because he is awesome at sending this message across. But what I am a little sad about, I'm not down. I'm just sad. It's I wanted to see the cave paintings, man.
Oh yeah.
I want to see the cave paintings, but I've heard him in other shows where he does show that these cultures have drawings and other kinds of written and down evidence of
petroglyphs, right?
Petroglyphs and all this kind of stuff, to where it does resemble that these Nephilim look like clowns. And it's wild. And I think
Creepy.
A big thing behind it is like when I brought up earlier in the show, where these Nephilim were evil men. They were terrible. They were giants. There was a lot of violence in those days, the Bible calls it. And I think they were just eating people, and there was a lot of sacrifice.
Fools.
There was a lot of cannibalism, all that stuff, all of the above.
Yep.
And I think when they have these characteristics of pasty white skin and when they have red hair, right? And we see a lot of information where giants have red hair.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
caves, Nevada.
Right. Exactly. Even just the Kandahar, right? Kandahar.
Yep.
That there's just so much documentation that these giants look like this, and it just shows more to why clowns are pasty white and they have red on their nose, red around their mouth, and as a smile, right? Another thing too that's kind of wild that he brings up in his book as well is that he compares the seraphim with the clown image, and the fact that a seraphim being in the way reptilian and snake-like, where the way their smiles and their mouth bite is like a smile, right? So listen to this. We had Ronan on the other day. Ronan was telling us, and I watched his show today. Ronan was telling us that he had a dream that his wife was telling him to go out into the backyard and to kill the thing, but his wife was the demon. I really wonder what would have happened if he did go out there.
Ooh, no.
You know what I'm saying?
No. That's
just
terrible.
Another like paranormal.
I didn't think of that.
Crazy thing going on. But anyways, when he realized that his wife wasn't his wife and that he was in a dream state, and he went to punch his wife caught his hand, and her mouth split like this, like it's split like a serpent, like an adder, right? And her head opened up, and whose head opens up? Hold on a second, I'm connecting dots here. When we're looking at the movie It, especially the newest one,
oh my gosh, yeah,
what does he do to draw your soul in and eat it? His mouth opens up wide, bro, like an adder, like it splits from the side and it just opens up. And that's why I'm saying, man, you can see that these things are the same spirit. Just there's just different ways and different cultures and different periods in time that yeah, exactly. It's circular, right? So, dude, I love that episode. I really think there was more to talk about it, but I'm kind of happy with what we covered.
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. I love how he covered the DMT. The spirit realm is necessary. He doesn't find it evil per se, but there are demons in the spirit realm, and he says it's important. It's the wiring for our realm wouldn't be here without the spirit realm. It was a very fascinating talk, dude. Seriously.
Spirit realm is awesome, but there's a lot of demons right now.
There's a lot of demons in that piece.
There's Nephilim that kind of died.
They're trapped
flood,
in there, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Well, hey, another episode in the books, boys. We got more to come. Folks, thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you being here. We really love our community. We really love our audience. If you're new, if you're returning, it doesn't matter. Smash that subscribe button. Turn on that notification bell. Indeed. Comment, like, and share the show. You can check us out on audio platforms right now. We're in a little bit of a catch-up mode with that, but we will catch up in time. We really release all of our content first on YouTube, so YouTube does get it first. And again, it helps us grow the show if you show us some support. If you're listening on an audio platform, please leave us a 5-star review, and all those things really just help us out. So we appreciate all of you. We love all of you, and we will see you next time.
Let's go.